Any regrets?
Yeah, 100 of them.
You've had people break down in front of you. How did you handle that as an interviewer? Drug culture at West Coast was happening.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, you tell me about it. You're writing about it.
If a journo wrote that, I don't think Simo would have cared, and you blokes probably wouldn't have cared. Do you like those answers?
Okay, BackChat Studios in Melbourne. We are here with one of the great journalists of our time. Mike Sheahan joins us. Hello, mate.
Hi, boys. Is there such a thing as a great journalist from the playing perspective?
Well, maybe, but I'm on the other side now, mate.
Yeah.
So,
You've sold out, have you?
well,
Yeah.
I don't want this to turn into you interviewing us, right? Just
He's
remember
already
you're over
started.
that side. I know, correct.
He's a pro.
So, Mike, I start every episode the same here on BackChat. We ask the same question to every guest we've ever had on, and it's to do with greatest sporting achievements. So when we interview a footballer, a cricketer, a boxer, we ask them their greatest sporting achievement, thanks to TABtouch, by the way, and we're powered by Paywise this year. But we ask them their greatest sporting achievement, not in their field of sport. But because you are a writer, an interviewer, a journalist, I will give you free range. I want to know your greatest sporting achievement. I know you played for Werribee back in the day.
Yeah.
But I want to know your greatest sporting achievement on any field. It could be cricket. It could be.
Well, I haven't had many.
Well, I want your best.
Should be easy to pick one.
You might have kicked 10 back in the day. You might have. you might have shirt fronted someone.
Yeah, that's it. Now we're getting warm.
I want your greatest sporting achievement.
Well, I played at Werribee. I played 60-odd games there, and I played a season with North Hobart in Tassie.
Right.
But they're not memorable for any great reason. I mean, I don't have any.
No. I won't take that. You were a school athlete. You were a school footballer. You must have kicked goal. Where'd you play did you play forward, back, mid?
Forward. Anyone can play back well. You know that.
Hey, now careful. You're on BackChat. Mike. Well, like how many goals you kicked in game? What's the most goals you ever kicked?
Well, probably 3.
All right, that's all right.
It's pretty
Can this go in another direction? I'm a bit uncomfortable with this.
Take it wherever you like.
Well, I was a reasonable tennis player.
There we go.
Good.
I played golf at a reasonable, so I was off 15 once, which is quite a good mark.
It's better than me.
But that was years ago.
You're a left-hander.
I'm a left-hander, I am, and a left-footer. No, look, and I'm not trying to be modest about this, but I didn't. I was a very keen competitor.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I had a lot of talent.
What sort of footy player were you? Were you a combative one?
I what?
Combative.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I should have been 6'3" because I was slow, right? But my hands were good, and I was brave enough, and I think I was a pretty good team player.
Yeah, I like it. Because I didn't know
like
that.
to have on your team.
Yeah, exactly right. I didn't know that about you. So this is good.
No.
This is how this works on the other side, Mike. I know you don't get interviewed much, mate, but
You must enjoy like making people uncomfortable when you interviewed people. So now you get to experience it for yourself a bit.
Making people uncomfortable or comfortable?
Both. Well, probably making people more uncomfortable.
I know. I enjoyed. No, I liked this concept, the chat.
Yeah.
I always when I talk once a year to the journalism students at Monash, and I always say the same thing because they're a new batch of students. Yep. It's like the arrow with the honey on the point. There's an arrow there, and it's headed for the subject, but there's a sweetener on the top. And I think you get a lot more out of people when they're comfortable, rather than bowling up and sort of saying bang about the biggest thing that happened in their life. So, but I enjoy that. I like conversations with people, and I like finding out things.
yeah, well, you're in good company because we're the same. So I want to know effectively what makes Mike Sheahan tick. Like you played footy for Werribee, you're a footballer, you're a sportsman, but then how does that transfer to media? How did you grow up?
Well, there's separate issues. I mean, the thing about the playing, I know it's nice that you acknowledge that, but I'm talking to a bloke who's played in an AFL premiership team. That's slightly different to playing VFA second division. So I tend to park that because my view's always been you don't have to be a great player to have an insightful view of what's happening in the game. That's got me into trouble with a few blokes, but that's my view. I mean, whatever level you play at, you still have to stand under the ball when you've got no idea who's coming. You still have to kick a goal when it's important. All those things are the same. It's just that the AFL players do it so much better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So what was life like growing up for you?
Well,
Were
I
you
was
sporty?
Yeah, of course I was. I was playing like lots of tennis, lots of footy. I was a mad football, like I was a football fanatic. Just couldn't get enough of it. I actually was almost self-taught. I left school at the end of year 11, but I'd read so much stuff in the papers, mainly sport, but then I would sort of get, if I had any spare moments, the front section would come into play. But I learnt from them about how to write, how to, spelling, all those sort of things, and about the world. So I would think the Herald Sun newspaper, which was the Sun when I was a kid, was the greatest teaching instrument that I had.
What's your first job in media?
I worked at the Werribee Banner. I went there notionally for 3 or 4 weeks at the end of year 11.
Right.
And I stayed there for 5 years.
What were you doing there for the 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, I was just a new bloke had bought the paper, and I think he wanted a lackey, which was fair enough. I mean, that's what we do when we're at school.
Yeah.
But the funny part about that, and this is genuinely funny, I was a kid. I was so at 18 and 19, I was playing in the at 18, I was playing in the under-19s, and I was writing about the senior team. And I don't know what it is about me, but I was like quite critical of blokes. And so I would be, the paper would come in on a Thursday, and I'd get to training Thursday night, and there'd be papers strewn all over the trestles in the rooms, and half the blokes wouldn't talk to me because I'd written this stuff that they took offence at. So we're playing with this kid, and here he is shitbagging us for what we did on the previous weekend. Yeah. But that was me. That was the way I did it. I was sort of passionate about footy, but passionate about journalism too. And I thought you should tell people what you think. My criticism of modern journalism is you don't hear enough of what they think. Now, whether they're entitled to have that opinion, I say they have, others say they don't. But I love what Kane Corns does, and I think more journos should be like that. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Do you remember what brought you to media? Do you remember what you loved early?
Well, it was by chance that I was in the media. I wanted to be I don't know if I wanted to be, but I was planning to be a school teacher. And then I got waylaid with this job for a month at the paper, and I liked it, and I stayed there. And I did lots of stuff. The bloke who was the boss he was a good bloke, but he was fairly lazy, so I did it all. Courts, council, meetings, sport, the whole lot. So it was a good education. And then I moved into metropolitan journalism at 22.
Which is where?
Well, it was the Age had an afternoon paper called Newsday.
Right.
It didn't last long. It lasted 7 months, but it was long enough for me. So then when they closed that down, I got job offers from the Daily Telegraph in Sydney and the Hobart Mercury. And because of the footy connection, I went to Hobart.
So now that Tassie's getting their own AFL side, you can look back on your time in Tassie.
Well, look,
what do you think about that?
I'm sort of seen to be certainly on side with it. The Tasmanian push, Alistair Lynch, Scotty Clayton, Matthew Richardson, Peter Hudson, all those blokes, they had a dinner recently in Melbourne, in the city, to talk about their strategy and to update people about where they're at. And I was invited to it because I was seen to be almost an associate Tasmanian because I had 3 years there and I played footy there. And I'm really pleased for them. I don't know whether it'll work. It's got some problems because of the population and because of the divide between the north and the south, but they're entitled to have a crack at it.
Yeah, you must look at that now, though. That how long ago was that? You were living.
I played in 1970 with North Hobart under John Devine, who you'd be familiar with. Yeah. He was the captain and coach.
Yeah.
So that's more than 50 years ago. Gee.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that to you, Mike.
Well, I went back to a North Hobart reunion a month ago. And I like reunions, school reunions, footy club reunions. I went back there and I was looking at blokes that I hadn't seen for 52 years. And I'm thinking, Jesus, how old are these blokes? What's happened to these guys? Where have they been? But that's what happens when you don't see people for that long. People get old and they've got walking sticks and they can't hear you and all that sort of stuff. But it was great to go back and just actually relive a few of those memories.
When did you start really diving into the VFL in your sort of journalism career? What was
Well, I came back from Hobart in 73 and worked on a magazine called Inside Football that you'd be familiar with. Yep. You too should be.
Absolutely.
And then the smartest decision I ever made when they said, we want you to work on Inside Football, I said, well, I'll do it on the condition I go on to the Age in summer between seasons. And they said yes, and I never left. I stayed at the Age for 7 years, I think, and then went to the old afternoon Herald paper. Do you remember that? The big broadsheet? You wouldn't remember that.
No.
It was a broadsheet afternoon paper, sold 400,000 or 500,000 copies a day. And I went there and replaced a bloke called Alf Brown, who was the chief footy writer when he retired, and then just went on from there.
It's interesting, the opinion stuff. You felt like it started as a 19-year-old, and I wonder how you reflect on that further down the track with opinion and criticism and maybe, without putting words in your mouth, the honesty that you've got to show as a journalist. Like, that started pretty early for you by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think I'm an opinionated person. I like expressing my opinion, and I think if I've done my homework and I've seen enough of the subject, I'm entitled to have that opinion. And it was interesting at SEN not so long ago, I made a guest appearance with Gary and Tim at breakfast, and as I was leaving, Bucks came in and we started talking about, one of the boys said to me, how'd you go with him? As in, like, how did Buckley go with Sheahan? And he said, oh, yeah. He said he gave me a couple of tickles, but he said we always thought he was fair, and I was very happy with that. You don't have to be the best writer ever, but I think if you're fair and considered, I think the blokes respect you for that.
Yeah, and so
but there was a funny story about Buckley.
Yeah,
I forget what year it was, but he was having a break, and Gubby Allen was then at Collingwood, and he said, can you put Bucks up at your Sorrento house for the weekend? He just needs to get away. So I said, sure, of course he can. So we went down, they had the weekend down there, and he bought me a bottle of Petaluma Red, which I really, which was pretty exy and pretty tasty. And I cooked him 3 weeks later, and he drank the bottle of red, and he said, well, you know what he would say.
Yeah.
So that was it. But I know he bought it with the best of intentions, but it just didn't happen to reach my table.
I can't imagine though. So that's that's how you look at it, but everyone looks at things differently. So the relationships in journalism, like relationships, is probably your most powerful, not weapon, but tool, right?
Yeah.
So was a relationships thing, you're talking about criticising your teammates as an under-19s or chief Herald Sun footy writer.
Yep.
Was that something that
Well, I think it just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
My view is that we are employed. If I was the chief footy writer, I needed to see and express a considered view about the game. And that's what I did. And even with blokes who were, when I was a kid, who were sort of 10 years older than me, I would tend to, I can't believe I did that, but I would take the stick to them because I thought that's what should happen. I'd watched the game. I'd seen what happened. I think the one thing I will say in retrospect, I think I was always too hard on the gifted players. I marked them too hard.
Right.
I know from having seen 1,000 games of football how tough it is and how good you've got to be to play it. And I think I just sort of didn't allow them to be normal, to be human and make mistakes.
Any big blow-ups over the years? I mean, we as in our age group have seen them, probably the Mark Jackson open mic springs to mind with a public one, but you would have experienced ones in private.
Oh, yeah, it's several, yeah. But I think
any memorable ones?
Yeah, they're all memorable. Well, the scariest one was Plugger.
Right. What happened?
When Plugger smashed Peter Caven, elbow to the face.
Remember that?
Nearly killed him. I wrote a story the next day saying, I'm no longer sure that Plugger's good outweighs his bad. And it was a pretty big call given his status and, just how people in public loved him. And the next Sunday I was working at the Herald Sun. Phone rang. John Anderson said, "There's a phone call for you," as in me. I said, "Yeah, put it through." This bloke, his name was Robert Hessian. He was managing Plugger at the time. So Hessian says, "Mike, we're not having this phone conversation, but if Plugger sees you at the footy, in the car park, in the street, he's going to fucking kill you." And I thought, and I just took that literally as that was really a genuine death threat, So
It wasn't though. Well, was it? It wasn't Abby.
If one bloke, if it could be genuine from one bloke in football, it would have been Plugger.
Right.
And I thought, there was, he wasn't going to come looking for me and bump me with a gun. But I thought if we crossed paths, I wasn't very optimistic about what he might do to me.
How did you at that point? Like we just said, like the relationship's super critical to be able to get information and tell stories, to not burn bridges like that.
Yep.
To be able to be harsh and be fair, but also still have the trust of people that you're talking about.
That's the conundrum.
Yeah.
I mean, you do need to get close to people to get their trust and get info. I mean, people don't. There's a misnomer about this. People in football don't sort of go to a discreet corner and ring you up and say, "I've got this big story for you," but they will talk to you about, if you go to them and sort of say, "Look, I've heard Schofield's got the flick from West Coast," right? Mm. The bloke who's your friend or through the industry sort of say, "Yeah, look, you better talk to Nizzy about that." But they'll either tell you or they won't deny it, right? Yeah. So it'll give you enough to go on. So I think that part is the good part, and I enjoy healthy relations with a lot of people in football. With Richard Collis and Andrew Ireland when they were at the Swans, and Gubby Allen, and I had a great friendship with Robert Flower. I love that because even at my age, they're still heroes. When I used to watch Robert Flower play, I was just like a kid in the grandstand as a 10 or 12-year-old, just marvelling at how good he was. So you do that, but then the crunch comes when you've got to write something negative about them. Most of them, I think, with the passing of time, would probably accept that, as Bucks did. I mean, Bucks was angry that I'd criticised him and drank my wine, but I think on reflection, he says, "Well, that's fair enough." And now, like you, Will, he's doing the job. He's sitting in the chair and making observations about A, footy teams, and B, players.
You touched on it a little bit around players to journos or into media. I don't like calling myself a journalist, mate. I'm just in media. But you must watch on and I don't know, look at it and think, what's it like with the shoe on the other foot kind of thing? Like, how do you look at players that are coming out and then into media?
Well, particularly some of them who would never talk to you, or would go through 10 or 12 years of their football and not talk to you, and then suddenly they bob up in the media. And I find that, I suppose it's not hypocritical, but it's just interesting that they make that transition. But players want to protect players.
Yep.
There's no question about that.
Yep.
And they'll even apologise if they're going to say something that they think might be harsh on a bloke. That's my criticism of the players who come out of the game and become commentators. Now, if calling the foot, and I like what you do, I listen to it and I hear it and I like it, but I think I like people to say, I want someone to sort of say, when a bloke doesn't go hard at the footy, he's got to go. Mm. He doesn't have to be silly about it, but when he just doesn't, and it happened in the Carlton Hawthorn game on Saturday, and a bloke who just went one-handed with his head down, and they don't call that out, and they don't call out when blokes miss, quote, simple shots for goal, which I think they should do.
I do that. Make sure you listen harder, please. I definitely criticise forwards. I find that very easy. But if I have to, it's an interesting point you make. If I have to be critical, and Dan is with me pretty much every day of my media life, I can be critical.
Yep.
Quite often, probably am overcritical.
On air?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All of our podcasts.
No, I do like what you do.
But I if I have to do it, I will err to criticise the club, right? And the establishment rather than the player, because I feel like not necessarily trying to protect players, but I also think that it's harder for players than it is clubs and decisions that clubs make. There's a lot of people doing that. There's boards, there's coaches, there's this and that. For players, it's harder. So I find it harder to be critical.
What do you do when Sam Darcy, who we all rate, is an outstanding talent, great hands, but he kicks 5 points? Now, if he kicks 5 goals, do they beat Adelaide? Who knows? But he still kicked 5 points. And so we're so forgiving with that. And I don't think we should be. I mean, I've just watched, like everyone else, the Olympic Games. They don't crumble under the pressure.
No.
And they've got the whole world watching them.
Unless they're breakdancing.
Well, I thought that was a good move. I don't know why she got marked so hard.
Oh, mate. No, Michael, we'll have to get you to do a bit of breakdancing after this. It's a really, I just find it really interesting because,
Do you bite your tongue? Let me ask you, reverse the roles briefly.
That's good.
Do you bite your tongue when you see something happen on the field that you know shouldn't happen?
Sometimes I do, yeah. I call it out sometimes. And again, it's no different to anything. Like I'm highly opinionated and often too opinionated, and I cop slack for it, but that's fine. Like, because I'm similar to you. I've been opinionated my whole life, and I just call it out how I see it. I don't try to be biased. I don't try to be positive or negative. I just say what I see. So, but in saying that, I do bite my tongue because I do know how hard that is, and I bite my tongue with journalists too. But I'll call journalists out too when I think it's bullshit, and I. If someone makes a mistake, I'll go, you know what, it's bloody hard. I'm doing that now. I can see that too. But I know that as a player too. So I just try to find the balance, really. I don't try to hide, bad play or anything like that. But in the same breath, I understand it. So it's like, well, Sam Darcy, let's just use him as an example, misses his goals. And I can call it out. But I also understand, like, he's a good player, and he, whatever's happened. And the week before, he probably kicked 4 goals. So
well, that's the Beveridge view too. That he'll get it back. His technique's okay. He's had a bad day, and he'll get it back. But I just think we are too forgiving of that. Yeah, and this is coming from the world's best choker, so I know what it's like to not to be able to do something. But I just think some of the goals that we see kicked that just defy physics to me. I mean, they're just brilliant goals, round corners and from angles that you wouldn't think it's possible to kick a goal. But the other ones, when they've got a 7-metre opening and they're 20 metres out in front and they can't put it through. And that's what I think is I think the industry just tends to pass over that. Oh, well, he's missed it. We just don't. It should be much more scientifically appraised, the kicking for goal.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Did you how do you, so you have the criticism of players, like when you write about them, then potentially clubs, coaches. What about from just the public? Because over time, especially if you wrote something negative about a fan, a team, the fans would come at you. Did you have any instances like that where, did it change the way you thought about anything because of the public?
No, I think my public image is okay. I think it's, particularly since I've retired, I was a great journalist now. But a lot of people would, certainly on social media, would have a real crack. Probably less inclined to just do it face to face, but there were plenty of people who were critical of what I wrote. Caroline Wilson probably gets it more than I did, but she's not on social media. Which is smart for her, because she does get a lot of. She's a very good journo, that's established, but the bloke in the outer doesn't like her much. But she doesn't listen to him.
Yeah, that is an interesting concept, that, because I look at Caroline and I know she's can be polarizing at times, but again, I just look at her as someone who sees and says what she sees, and I don't know how much you can argue with that stuff. I wonder back on you, Mike. As you reflect on what you were able to do through a media career, what did you love doing? Like, was it the writing? Was it the interviews? Was it the chats? Was it the was it the criticism?
No, I didn't like that all that much. It's because Alistair Clarkson, he coined this name for me. He calls me Precious. And I live with that. I understand that. I do overreact to criticism and observations that might be negative, but that's okay. I mean, Clarko and I are friends. But he just calls me Precious wherever we go. But if I had to pick one, I finished at the Herald Sun in 2011. and I haven't missed, the art of getting at the computer and writing a story, but I have missed doing open mic, which I finished in 2020. I mean, that was my show. Without being egotistical, I picked the subject, I did the questions, and I did the interviews.
You mean your name's in the show name?
Yeah.
It's your show.
But it was, and that's not about that. It's not about, well, I have my own show, how good am I? It's just that if anything went wrong with it, it stood or fell on what I did.
So I want to talk about open mic because I think what we do is quite similar. It's not the same, but I mean, that's what I love about what we do. We do so much stuff. We do opinion stuff. I write, I do special comments, I do stuff for clubs. But the stuff I love is this, the one-on-one conversations that you can have and just learning about people that you wouldn't maybe get from just watching them from externally. So open mic, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on it in terms of preparation you do, editing procedures, like was it a 3-hour chat that was condensed into 45? Like I want to ask some questions about. So the preparation side of things, like what went into an interview? Were you a rock up and just ask questions sort of guy? Were you
No.
month of preparation? What did it look like?
No, I've always been big on prep. And if I would say if I were to interview you, I would ring you. So, Will, it's Mike Sheahan here. When you're next in Melbourne, can you come into Fox and do open mic? And if you said yes, then I do my homework on you, on what I know, what I can find out from footy books, from Wikipedia, from all those sort of normal sources, and then I would talk to one or two people who are your friends.
Nice.
And I would sort of say...
You probably get the best questions from there.
Exactly. And just to say, look, I'm doing an interview with Will. I'm not looking for dirt, but you tell me what you know of him, what you like about him, what he's done behind closed doors that you can share with me.
So how refined would you be coming into an interview then, given like high preparation? You know everything you need to know? Were you coming in with questions you wanted to hit? Did you have a list of questions? Did you?
Yeah, no, I did. You obviously didn't see it often enough, Will. I used to have a clipboard.
No, I watched. I just wondered if there was anything on it or not.
Yeah, it's just a show.
Well, one of those, it's interesting. I'll tell you about that. A clipboard with, say, a couple of pages of questions, right? And it was sort of like a safety net. I liked just conversing eye to eye, but if I got into trouble or the answers were short or whatever, I could refer to that. But I remember I had an issue with my short-term memory. This is 6 or 7 years ago because I had a neurological condition,
right.
And I was talking to Matty Lloyd, and I had to. I've got a pen and my clipboard, and I had to 3 times. I've got Lloydie's number written down, not number, Lloydie's name.
Oh yeah.
So that I didn't forget who I was talking to. So that was a bit daunting.
Wow.
And I know him as well as I've seen him play the bulk of his games, but it was just one of those things that at this point I thought don't want to sit there and have that blank look about who am I talking to. That was scary.
That must have been, I was about to say, it must have been scary.
Yeah, it was. That's the only time that it's happened that badly, but that was true. I just had to look down and sort of see Matty Lloyd, so that to remind me of who I was talking about. And I knew everything else about him.
Yeah.
And they were saying, I'm scared that I'll forget his name.
Wow.
Did you? Sorry.
No, it's just the prep was important, and I would always have 10 more questions than I needed, and we would interview for probably 40 minutes, and then it would be cut back to 27.
That's a short time. 40 minutes chat and then a 27-minute. So you might get the best of the best, but people, if you're talking about someone's football life, we just had Dermot Brereton on. Try to get that into 27 minutes. Pretty difficult.
Yeah. Well, I did Dermot.
Yep.
And I'm talking to Dermot about the suicide of his father and his brother, and his relations with people, like with how he got on with Dunstall, just stuff like that. That was pretty heavy duty, but that's more important. I'm not saying that you blokes think I do this, but I don't focus on goals and marks and all that jazz. There'll be 2 or 3 big milestone games, and then it's about not their private life, but their life off the field.
The person.
Yeah.
Did you have much of a team, like producers working on any of that research for you, or was it just all you?
No. It sounds egotistical. It's not, but the reality was I picked I mean, I would talk to some people about, what do you think if we get such and such? Yeah, good idea, let's do it. But then they were my questions, and I sat in the chair and I asked them. And I'd have a producer who did the stuff the producers do, and had the task of cutting it down from, say, 40 minutes to 27. 27 is a long time with one person.
Yeah. We did one with Adam Simpson last week, went 2.5 hours.
Really?
Yeah,
Did it?
one-on-one.
Wow.
And I could have gone longer, to be honest.
a lot of ground to cover in that.
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And what did you put to air?
2.5 hours, probably maybe 2 hours 25. He maybe
Did you really?
Maybe wants one story out.
Gee.
Yeah, I spoke to you about this off air. We have a guest editing structure and strategy, basically, where we say guest has first edit. So we have this chat, and if you defame someone, I'll probably give it to you. But if you say something that you don't necessarily want in public, I'll say to you, we don't have to put that to air, Mike.
Yeah.
You said that's too generous.
Yeah, I agree with that's too generous.
We also have a different format. Like with podcasting, it can go for 10 hours. It doesn't matter. Like, people listen to what they want.
Yeah.
With TV, obviously, you have to stick to your time slot, so it's much more controlled.
That's where we are.
Well, I did Lethal for an hour. He was one of the early ones. I was always keen on this concept of having an interviewer sit down with a person who had a story to tell and let them tell it. Because normally the interviews on telly and radio are probably at best 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah. Which is one story.
Yeah.
Maybe two.
So my view was get them there, get them to sort of tell as much of their life story as feasible, and then if you have to trim it. But Lethal went for an hour. Mark Jackson went for 40 minutes, and Fox didn't want to run that. If there's anyone in Australia that didn't see Mark Jackson, he was imposed on me. I didn't want to do him. It was a theme week from the 80s about what footy was like back then, and Fox picked Jackson as an interview subject to fit the theme. So I did it. It was very difficult. It was difficult for me.
It was volatile.
Yeah, it was. Embarrassing for him, I think, if he ever chose to look back at it and see how he behaved. And then when it finished, because it's on closed circuit at Fox, while I'm doing it, anyone in the office can see it as it's happening. And I walked out, and I knew it had been rugged, but I walked out, and every person in the office sort of said something about it to me, and then management said, "Oh no, we won't be running that." And I said, "No, we've got to run it. You just can't invite a bloke in and sort of say, if you say nice things, we'll run it, and if you don't, we won't." And I said, the only condition I'd put on it, we have to run it in its entirety. So I think it went for 42 minutes. And then he couldn't say that it was edited, and we tried to cast him in a bad light. So that's what happened. And to be fair to me, I thought I handled myself as well as anyone could in those circumstances.
Did you shake hands at the end of that?
I hope.
I don't mean like literally, but was it mic's off, go fuck yourself, see you later, or was it a
No, it was tense.
Yeah.
I remember Stephen Quartermain said on Channel 10, he said, of course, that was set up. That was just a ratings push, Well, wasn't that? There was no way of it. And I think we shook hands, but not with any feeling. I think I did that because I did that with everyone else.
How did you handle emotion? You've had people break down in front of you. How did you handle that as an interviewer?
Yeah, difficult, but I knew where I was going with it. I knew with people who had sort of really gut-wrenching stories, or that's where it would probably go. And probably the most graphic one was Brian Lake. Did you see that?
Yep.
And my instinctive response was, when we finished, I was gonna just get up and hug him. And I probably wish I had have, but I didn't know him that well. I didn't want to take the liberty of two men hugging each other on telly. But he was a wreck at that time. But there's been lots of them. I mean, I talked to Peter Schwab about losing his daughter, and I remember saying, I think she was 6, I think. I remember saying, do you feel cheated? And he just looked at me and he said, feel cheated? It was as if to sort of say, how could you possibly ask that? And I understood what he meant. I wasn't being disrespectful, but I didn't quite. It was just one of those follow-up questions. Did you feel cheated? And I'll never forget that look. And I'm a good friend of Swabby's. And it was just as if it like cut him to the heart, just about his little girl, and she died.
Yeah, which is brutal.
Yeah.
Probably about as brutal as it gets.
See, I did. There were 234 episodes of that.
Yep.
Over 11 years. And it was something. It was my personality in that show. As I said, I hope you don't think that I'm talking about me being good. I'm just saying how much I was involved in it, and I loved it. And I would have done it another year, but I didn't think Fox were as keen as I wanted them to be, and we were struggling to get big names because we'd done so many of them, and so many other big names wouldn't do it.
I read that you felt like you'd missed a couple. Wayne Carey being one of those.
Yeah.
Did you miss anyone else?
Wayne Carey, it's an interesting relation. I proclaimed Wayne Carey the best player that's ever played.
In your 50?
No, yes, but the AFL commissioned me to do the best 50 players ever.
Yeah.
And I had him at 1. And you know what Duck would be like with that. I mean,
happy.
Yeah. But we're not great mates. I've never had a lot to do with him. My eldest boy, Tony's a friend of his. So we've had a few drink sessions together. But he wasn't interested in coming on, and I wasn't interested in doing his podcast either. I don't know what that means, but I would have, he would have been awkward, Duck, because of his history and because of all the things that I would need to ask him, but then I think he knew that they were coming, so he said no.
Did you ever chat to Cuzzy? Ben Cousins?
Yeah, I know who Cuzzy is.
Sorry, you looked at me like I didn't know.
Well, I was working out how to answer. The best chat I've had with Ben was about 3 months ago in the street in Albert Park, and he was with Gardy.
Great mate, Michael Gardner.
Yeah, Michael Gardner. And we were walking in opposite directions on the street, and he said hello to me. He said quite a warm hello, and we had a brief chat, and then that was it.
Did you would have been, that would have been right, prime time, Herald Sun, chief footy writer when drug culture at West Coast was happening?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, you tell me about it. You were writing about it. I got there at end of 2006. So,
well, see, Dean Cox was one of those blokes who wouldn't come on.
Yeah,
and my guess about that is because he didn't want to be harassed with all the questions about the supposed drug culture at West Coast.
Oh,
Well, it might not, because he doesn't want to come on BackChat, and it's not about the drug culture. So
okay,
he might just not like doing it.
Yeah, but see, that was my guess because of the history of the footy club. But I named Chad Fletcher. Was it Chad Fletcher? Yeah, that OD'd in LA.
Yep.
On the back page of the Herald Sun. To which Colin Young, who you know, the player manager based in Perth,
Yes.
said he would run me out of the industry, which didn't quite happen. But I was prepared to do those things because I think we should know. I don't like stories where we're talking about someone who's done something good or bad that we don't name. And my feeling now is that there was a major drug problem at West Coast. Whether it tarnishes the premiership, it's hard to know. Robert Wall says it did. We were on the couch together at the time. He said the premiership was tainted. I still haven't got a firm view on that.
Well, I was there as a player at the end of 2006, which is when they won the flag.
Yeah.
I never physically saw a drug culture. So whether I don't know how you want to define a drug culture, but like as a young player at that football club, I had nothing but I walked into nothing but
you would have been wide-eyed and
winning culture. Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
probably.
but and I accept that. But if I give you the names of Cousins, Kerr, Mainwaring, Fletcher,
yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but I think you could probably do that at most clubs.
Could you?
Fair, probably. I don't want to get into this like this so much because I feel like you're going to start turning on me like a journalist again.
He's taking
But it's interesting you brought up Robert Walls because I actually I rang Wolsey 2018. I got his number. The start of 2018, he said that we were going to win the wooden spoon, and then he doubled down on it 2 weeks out from finals and said we'd be straight sets in finals, and we won the flag in 18.
Wow.
And I remember ringing him on the Wednesday after we won the cup with a couple of my teammates, giving him a bit of feedback on the voicemail.
Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Was there any alcohol involved?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But I chat to him today about it. Like, yeah, it was something that we used to motivate us actually at the start of the year.
Yeah.
Simo had it on the wall.
Did he?
Yeah, Robert Walls,
Yeah.
you blokes are wooden spooners.
See, back to the original question. If a journo wrote that, I don't think Simo would have cared, and you blokes probably wouldn't have cared. But coming from Wolsey, who was a premiership player and a premiership coach and was well known for his status in the industry, I reckon that makes the difference. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Well, no, it makes a difference publicly. It's not really how I say it. If you had written it, I would have called you on Wednesday as well.
Which, bloody oath. I never took calls from players the week after the premiership.
It's probably smart. It's probably very smart.
Yeah. So obviously the West Coast drug culture story was a really big one. Another one that comes to mind is like the Essendon drug, well, the
saga,
supplements. What like if you were sort of looking back at sort of the time of you covering the AFL, what would be some other of those key milestone things that happened like in your time covering the game?
Well, probably. Well, the one that springs to mind instantly is, say, Fitzroy's demise, going out of the competition, and ultimately merging with Brisbane and becoming the Brisbane Lions. But I'm probably more focused. Well, I know I'm more focused on what happens on the ground. I mean, I've always said this whenever we speak publicly. Caroline Wilson and I say, Caro, her focus is on the boardroom. Mine is what happens inside the fence. So my love is for the purity of the game. Blokes playing footy, winning games, big efforts on the field. So I'm probably thinking more of games that I've seen where blokes have excelled to a ridiculous level. And players changing clubs. I mean, I wrote the story about Kelvin Templeton and Peter Moore. Heard of him?
Yeah, Peter Moore, Hawthorn player. Is that right? I don't know.
Oh, young people amaze me.
I mean, what?
Young people, I'm staggered with. Have you heard of Captain Cook?
See, I have this discussion with Mark Reddings every bloody day on our Shelter Footy Cast, and he tells me, mate, just because you weren't born doesn't mean you don't know about
Correct.
it. Oh, you sound exactly like him.
There'll be plenty of things we could ask you about of like modern day things that you might not have heard of. It's just the same.
Tell us your favourite Taylor Swift song.
Rap dancing.
Rap dancing.
What's your break dancing?
Yeah.
The Peter Moore and Kelvin Templeton. Now I'll just set a quick scene for you.
Yeah.
We're both captains of their clubs, Collingwood and Footscray, both Brownlow medalists. And I wrote a story that they were going to be they were for sale for $1 million. This is 1982 or 3.
A lot of money.
Yeah, $1 million.
A lot of money then.
And it happened, right?
Right.
Now, that's 40 odd years ago, but it's still the biggest story that I ever wrote. I mean, can you imagine today, Darcy Moore and whoever's captain of the Bulldogs? Who's captain of the Bulldogs?
Bont.
Oh, yeah, Bont. My favourite player. Darcy Moore and the Bont being put up in a package and then ending up at another club next year.
Yeah, wow.
How big a story is that?
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
And it happened.
It happened, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I still don't. It might be abrogating my responsibilities as the chief football writer, but I still have a clear differential in my mind that it's more important to talk about the players than what happens off the ground.
So you did that with your 50 as well, with Mike Sheahan's 50. You used to write at the start of the year and the end of the year.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Were
a
you
pretty
in it?
easy concept. Again, you wrote it. So I don't think I was. I don't think I probably ever deserved to be, though, Mike.
When I was friendly with your mother, I think I put you on.
Well, just don't worry. I'll get my proper journalistic style on and speak about that soon, Mike. I'll put you right on the spot.
friendly with
And turn
your
these
mother.
turn these bloody spotlights up. Isn't that right, Mike Sheahan? You dated my mother. Now, it's an easy concept to understand. Top 50 footballers, right? How much work went into that? Like,
Well, I'll tell you about the impact that it had. I walked in here and you just finished an interview with Dermot Brereton,
Yeah.
who's about to turn 60, and he had a go at me about being put below Dunstall in the top 50 list,
which is hilarious.
which is 30 years ago.
Which is brilliant. Which is brilliant.
No, there was a lot of, but there's no right or wrong answer to that. I think you just have to have enough credibility for people to sort of say, I agree with that or that's wrong. I was always happy with the top 5 to 10. And then from there, you've got 100 blokes that could go into the remaining number of spots.
You would know this, I'm sure. Did you get many years right? As in the list released before the year was the top 10 was the same at the end of the year? You wouldn't be able to do that many times because players jump off the page every year.
Yeah, they do. They do.
So did you get many right?
Well, I'm tipping neither of you know the answer to this, so I would say all of them.
Tell me the actual answer. Some.
I don't think I was embarrassed by who I'd had in the top 10, which is
So you didn't get something too wrong.
well, no. It's hard to remember. I started doing those in 1990, I think.
Right. I didn't realise it went that far back.
Yeah.
Right.
It was at the Sunday Age, and I worked there from 89 to 93.
And Derm. So obviously one of the first ones was Derm was in it.
Well, the first one, the first number one, big front page picture in colour with his footy gear holding a footy, Stephen Kernahan. And I don't think anyone could query that.
Superstar.
Yeah, he was. Hardest position on the ground, just starred there for 10 or 12 years. But no, I don't think I ever had any duds at one.
The AFL commissioned you to write 50 of all time.
Yep,
Who was
they
it?
did.
Who was your number one?
The Duck, Wayne Carey.
Yes.
Lethal was 2.
Yes.
I think Ted Whitten was 3, or Gary Ablett.
So does that mean that's your eyes the top 4 you've seen? Like those 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, but because I did that 15 years ago, I now would wrestle with where little Gary goes compared to old Gary.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And when people, I get asked that question a lot. I say, look, if I wanted to go to the footy just to watch the game in all its glory, I'd go and watch Gary Senior. If I wanted to coach one of them and aim for a premiership, I'd take Gary Junior.
Well, I got the best of both worlds. I got to watch Gary Senior as my favourite player as a Geelong fan growing up, and then I got to play on Gary Junior and get my ass handed to me by Gary Ablett Junior.
Well, who if you had to separate them, who would you go for?
I would like to say I don't know why the fact that coaches used to put me on Gary Ablett. Like I'm 195 centimetres tall. You want to get someone smaller on him?
Yeah.
Probably Ablett Senior because of the memories. Like I was
you were
there.
a kid.
Yeah. Like I was there at the MCG when he took that mark against Collingwood. Like and I was young.
We didn't mark that.
Well, as a Geelong fan, he did, and the umpire said he did, Mike. So,
But you're probably more objective as a player than you were as a kid watching it.
yeah.
And I know I'm Gary Ablett. Wolsey says the only bloke who would get him out of his house to go and watch the footy would be Gary Ablett Senior.
Senior.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
But I can't. Some of the things that the little bloke did just still stagger me. They showed Dusty Martin's highlights the other day, and we all know how good his package is. But even at the end of that, I still wasn't sure that he was a better player than Gary Ablett Jr.
We're we're sort of coming towards the end, Mike. But you said you used to get these done in 40. We're already about an hour in, so it's not that hard to chat for an hour.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to try to emulate Simo.
No, we won't get there. But I'll get a couple more questions to ask. Podcasting, which we're doing now, BackChat. You stepped into that realm.
I've stepped out of it.
You've had a couple. Yeah, I want to ask about it.
Do you?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm wondering how you found podcasting and.
Oh no, I like it because you've replicated it. You're doing exactly the same thing. Easy chat with blokes who know their stuff, and it's an easy conversation. But we hit a hurdle with Nicky Winmar, and it ended up costing us $100,000 for allegedly defaming Nicky, which was crap. So that cost me $35,000, which, and in itself, that wasn't a major deal. I mean, I would have much preferred to have the money than lose it, but. I quit the program. I was on with Sam Newman and Don Scott.
Yep.
And
it's Mum's favourite podcast, by the way.
Was it?
You cannot be serious, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, it was Mum's favourite podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though I've gone from it.
It's BackChat now, mate. BackChat, yeah.
Well, but she'd like Sam Newman, though, wouldn't she?
Love Sam Newman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, and I've done one with BT, and I filled in for on Caroline Wilson's program a couple of times. I like the concept. The one with, was an ill-considered decision to go on with Sam and Don Scott.
Right.
I don't like Scotty much, and Sam's just a loose cannon.
Right. Have you fallen out with those blokes?
Yep.
Off the back of that?
Yes. Yeah. You like those answers?
I just left you some space to see if you want to end out with it, mate. No, it's brilliant. And yeah, and I will finish with because I've always been a footy nuffy, and I was lucky enough to play the game at the highest level and do all that stuff. But above all, like, I'm a footy fan, and so I consumed a lot of media growing up, and I used to love open mic, and so I know a lot of your work. And you used to put it to people, isn't this right? And you would say that, isn't this right, Mike Sheahan? You used to date my mother, didn't you? Well, that's what you'd put to him, right?
Well, let me just give you one tip, because you now are a media practitioner, both of you. The good journo always knows the answer to the question he asks.
Well, I know the answers to that.
No shocks. No shock.
It was very funny because, my old man passed away, as most people listening to this would know, when I was in my early 20s. And Mum's been living her life in Geelong. And I remember her calling me and saying, I'm dating Mike Sheahan. I said, you fucking what?
He said, but he's a journo.
Yeah, correct. Because I was still a player, I think, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, she told me she was happy, so that's all I need to know.
To me, you were a very private individual. From a long, long way away, but I would have thought you would have been a difficult nut to crack. But I find you much.
You never interviewed. You never asked to interview me.
No, I know.
I was the opposite of that, mate. Complete opposite. I told every journo in Western Australia. So maybe you just didn't like making it across the Nullarbor. But I told every journo. I had a big Barney with Mitch Cley. Not Barney at all, but he called me out saying fucking this and that on social media. I said, mate, just call me. I've never not taken an interview in my life. I was one of the more open ones, I think.
But I haven't finished my statement when you interrupted.
My show, though.
But I see a different side, but I wasn't sure. That was just my observation from a long way away. And there's no question the Victorians, in a media sense, don't give the non-Victorian teams the attention they deserve.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably what Kane's done. You mentioned Kane earlier on from South Australia coming into the Victorian market. I think that's why.
Although I like him because of how brave he is, and he'll take him on, and he's well armed. He argues really well, and it doesn't matter how big the subject is, he'll go from. I think he's a fraction soft on Port Adelaide.
He's very soft on Port Adelaide, and he knows he is, and he does it deliberately.
Yeah, but everyone else is fair game, and I love what he does.
Yeah, so do I. Last question from me. I don't know if you got any last ones, Dan, but any regrets?
100 of them.
Lots?
Yeah.
But you move on. I don't know.
Well, I regret taking Barry Hall's side when he punched Matt Maguire. Remember, and the question was whether if he got rubbed out, he wasn't going to play in the grand final.
Right, that's right.
And I took the view. There was this weird rule in football at the time that you could be deemed to be in the play. You know, so long as it was sort of like so long as it was with a neighbouring postcode. Yeah. And I think deep down I knew that the right thing was for Hawley to be rubbed out. But you get caught up in it. I liked the Swans and I really liked certain people there and it was going to be great for the grand final and all those things, which wasn't my role, but I think I fell for that. So therefore I argued several days in a row that the rule should exonerate Hawley, and I'm not saying because of this, but and then he was subsequently he was exonerated and he played and they won the flag.
Thanks to you.
Do you,
but I think those things sometimes it's just an aggregate thing. They just so many people say the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
And then people changes or it helps mold people's opinions.
That actually was going to sort of be my question about media's influence on decisions being made by certain things. I reckon people would have this idea that, for instance, a coach being sacked, if the media rides it hard enough, could that push for a decision to be made? Do you think there's any merit in that?
Yeah,
Does
I
the
do.
media have a bit of control?
I do, and I think which takes us to the good bloke card. I think there's no question that applies in football, and the media haven't gone after Ken Hinckley because they like him, but 6 or 8 weeks ago, like he looked dead in the water. I don't care what anyone says now; they'll say, "Oh, 6 weeks." They'll call him for his head, but his head was on the block, I reckon. But because we all like him, no one went after him. No one goes after Ross Lyon or Brad Scott. I don't know whether they like or fear those two, but those things, too many people think we've got to be totally objective, which we should be, but you can't be sometimes. If we were best mates, Will, you and I, I'm going to be very, very reluctant to bag you and I.
Yeah, but I think that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
you don't have to be so objective and unbiased that you can't protect people. I don't lean into the. Yeah, I think that's all right. I think that's life. You're going to look after your mates. You should look after. You should look after your mates.
It's the good bloke. What about if I didn't like Dan and he was guilty of the same thing?
Well, that happens. We see that.
Yeah.
You can see it happen.
It happens a lot over in the West with the West paper.
Yeah.
Like they
let me ask you two.
People.
Now that we're talking about over in the West,
Okay, here we go.
what about the job that the West Australian did on Simo?
Yeah,
prime example of that.
It was a really good thing to witness because in the 6 weeks leading up to that, and we're heavily involved in West Australian media and I'm working across pretty much every platform there. And so being a former player under Adam Simpson, answering a lot of questions myself in that regard, and he was under the pump, clearly, got sacked. But it was a build-up of pressure, and the pressure was real from the fans. The fans were calling for his head for 6 weeks, I reckon. You'd know, you're the fan.
Almost on 2 years.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of negative Adam Simpson stuff going around. And then he gets sacked, mutually departing ways, but he gets sacked.
Yeah.
And still, it's almost like he's sacked. But then he's done his press conference. He's clipped the West. And it was just a clip. It wasn't a shirt front. It was just a little drive-by on the way out, which he probably deserved. He copped a lot from the West over his tenure. And it was you want more access and respect from our players. How about you show some yourself? I think fair enough comment. They were butthurt by that. Their egos were bruised. They were completely. Oh, absolutely. They acted like children. Yeah, and whoever approved that. I'm not sure who, editor, sub-editor, you know how newspapers work better than I do. They went back at him in the form of the back page or the front page the next day. And what it did, whether you like it or not, and I went out publicly and defended Simo. He's my mate. But what it did do, the public went from sack Simo, thank God Simo's gone, to how dare you attack Adam Simpson, he's ours. And like we spoke to Simo about it, it turned the rhetoric into fuck the West.
Yeah,
and we're coming for you now. Don't attack our own. It was interesting. It'd make a good study to look at that week of media. And then the next day they put out a "We're so sorry" basically back page. And I thought that was worse than the first one.
It was like a fluff piece on him.
If you're going to go down that path, just stick with it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you retire or die. I mean, you become so much better. I get people pulling me up all the time. Oh, miss your stuff. Wish you were still working at the paper.
That's brilliant, mate. I think that's a good way to end it. Mate, really appreciate your time.
I got one more.
Okay.
I got one more for you.
Okay.
Big thing over in the West is the coverage of Harley Reid.
Yep.
He is probably before he even played his first game. I think they had him on the paper for like 40 days in a row. Or something. Back page.
There's a lot.
Do you think there's responsibility on the media's behalf to, obviously the West want to sell papers and he is content which sells. Do you think there's responsibility on the media to respect someone's personal life in that regard, to not, I mean, especially someone who's like 17, 18, 19?
Did they invade his personal life?
Well, they put him on the back page of a paper.
But that was in his, as Harley Reid, the footballer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You blokes would know better because you live there, but they've been starved of good footy stories for quite a while over in Perth, haven't they?
Mm.
And I think
the
new kid comes on and his first 8 weeks were brilliant. I thought it became tedious, but I didn't feel for Reid in terms of the space had been invaded.
There's no like duty of care from a media's perspective.
No, probably not. No, but the more relevant question now to me is, if he were eligible, would he still win the Rising Star?
If he were eligible, would he still win the Rising Star? Of course he would. He should, and he should be eligible.
Yeah, well, there's two questions there. But what about his last 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
He's the best first year player in the comp, but by a mile. And I'm not biased to West Coast. In fact, I've spent the last 3 weeks bloody copping it left, right, and centre and teeing off at West Coast. But he's the best player.
Who would be better?
George Wardlaw. We're speaking to him tomorrow. We'll ask him.
Oh, yeah. Speaking to George Wardlaw.
Good,
yeah, good. Someone else got rubbed out, didn't
Darcy.
Darcy, yeah.
Darcy.
Sam Darcy?
Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought Reid was in front of Darcy.
Oh, he is.
Oh, is he? Oh, I see. Oh, sorry. Well, I'll take that back. I obviously don't know anything about this business. I'm going.
Mate.
You've offended me enough.
Piss off.
Precious.
Mate, always really just wanted to chat to you, and it's been a great chat. Thanks for taking us a little bit through the journey. We could probably do this for longer, to be honest, but thanks for joining
boys.
us.
Enjoyed it.
Mike Sheahan, everybody. BackChat _ on socials. A big thanks to our sponsors and partners, Paywise, ID Athletic, TABtouch, Whippersnapper Whisky, Mamba Digital, and the Leadable Precinct supporting us. You can find all of our stuff at backchatstudios.com.au. I'm going to go catch up with Mum for coffee. I don't know if Mike's invited or not.